Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back another video from Annie News. Today we've got another cut content video for the Overlord movie. So much left out, it's unreal. How many episodes are we gonna get? We don't know, but we'll check them out as they come out, because I love checking this out. So apparently this is like a big bit that was cut out. So let's see.
If you were ever curious as to what Neia said in order to warrant such a scolding here, that's some cut content we're about to find out. This audience with Ainz was actually quite the major exclusion from the movie, and that unfortunately included a very intense moment with Neia. It's a scene I really wish we got to see animated, since it goes to highlight just how much Neia actually cares about all this. It was also quite the entertaining interaction for all parties involved. This, however, was preceded by the paladins experiencing the city, as well as the full reasoning behind why Momon couldn't be of service to them. It's all context that establishes the Sorcerer Kingdom from an outsider's perspective. So, if you want to see how Ainz's audience with the paladins really went, stick around as this will cover all of that. 5. The Sorcerer King. With the delegation now finally walking the streets of Erantel, they were on their way to the finest inn the city had to offer. Everyone was fully expecting the streets to be filled with undead and demi-humans, but what they saw instead was mostly humans. The only undead were the guards or skeleton horses pulling carriages, while the demi-humans weren't quite what they were expecting either. Just like how we saw in the movie, goblins were marching in an orderly fashion contrary to what they were known for. Osk's bodyguard could be seen in the distance, then a frog-like demi-human was standing upright. Everything seemed just like how it was in a normal country, making it hard to believe this was a place ruled by an undead. No one even seemed frightened in the slightest, so it was clear the people had either gotten used to their new way of life or broadened their worldview. Either way, life here was clearly better than rule under Yaldabaoth. Now, it was before Neia could take in any more of the city that Remedios would stop the group in order to talk to some dwarves. She needed to ask for directions since she wasn't sure where she was headed anymore.
I love how he uses like characters as examples from other shows that he talks about in these things. So like that's from that Tam's Reincarnate Slime, isn't it? Or then sometimes he'll use like Shield Hero stuff because he did cut content on time. Fake characters, stuff like that. I think it's quite cool that he keeps it all kind of relevant within like the sphere of things he talks about.
For the dwarves who were currently doing road maintenance, they didn't seem to mind giving out these directions. So it was after that Gustav would offer money as a tip, and again he would be declined, just not out of fear this time. The reason was that the information they requested wasn't anything particularly important, so the dwarves didn't mind helping out free of charge. It was only after Gustav insisted that the dwarves would happily accept and become a lot more open. As for why they could take the money and not the guards, well, that's because they weren't technically people from the city either.
Right.
Skeletons were the ones doing all the labor, while they were simply brought in as technical advisors. It was a different method of work from what they were typically used to, but after seeing how efficient it was, the dwarves started to see undead in a totally different light now. Their value in simple manual labor was far too good to overlook. This obviously went to surprise Remedios, but it was here in the Sorcerer Kingdom that undead were essential, often to the point that they were taken for granted. Since they don't get tired and don't need to eat or sleep either, they were the best candidates to take on the tough chores nobody else wanted. In fact, they were so convenient that many of the farmhands couldn't even fathom going back to the days of horse and oxen.
Why would you bother?
For the dwarves, it seemed that even their own nation was starting to adopt the idea of undead labor. Now, they had mentioned they were from dwarf country and for the time being were staying locally in the demi-human quarters. It was the area where all other races aside from humans stayed. Before, it used to be the city's slum district, but after being torn down and wholly reconstructed, now it served as a comfortable stay for everyone. Well, everyone except those who used to live there. Obviously, these slums used to be occupied by someone, leading Remedios to think that maybe they were the ones turned into undead. The dwarves could neither confirm nor deny that, but they did hear that most were dispatched to villages. You see, with a lot of abandoned villages located around the city, many fields were just given away in hopes they might be restored by them. With an untiring labor force helping with all that agriculture, it shouldn't be hard for those displaced to find a home for themselves. Well, theoretically at least. Not to mention, food was incredibly affordable too. Turns out, an unpaid labor force makes for quite a low cost of living. Lastly, Remedios would ask about the skeleton horses, wanting to know if they had a name or something. The dwarves unfortunately didn't have an answer, but what they did know was that it didn't matter.
Well, yeah, because why would you ask? It's one of those, isn't it? It's like we've got like these undead laborers that can do anything they want. We don't have to feed them. We don't have to like shelter them. They can do everything they want. It's business, so why would they? Yeah, they wouldn't ask.
You see, just because they were super strong didn't mean they were gonna hurt anybody. They were simply extremely effective at facilitating transportation. Why then did Remedios want to know their name? Well, just like Gustav, they both had an inkling as to what they were.
Oh.
In fact, the moment Gustav first laid his eyes on them, he'd started to act strange ever since. Both refused to accept what they were looking at was what they thought, though, since if it truly was the undead that they were thinking of, the idea of controlling it was simply impossible.
Right.
To them, it was unfathomable to think that they could be tamed like this. So, rather than confront what both subtly knew was the truth, they simply continued onward without saying anything. It was once they got to the inn that their rooms were secured with no problem. The horses were taken to the stables courtesy of the hotel workers, then a meeting would be held to discuss what came next. Naturally, the next course of action was to request an audience with the king, a task which only Gustav could do. The others were to meet with influential individuals and try to find Momon. The first place to look was going to be the Adventurers Guild, but the branch located here had been on hiatus for quite some time now.
No, look there.
Reason being that all requests were currently being handled by the Sorcerer King's subordinates. That's not to say that there weren't any adventurers around, but of the ones that were, they definitely had a lot of free time on their hands. That being the case, it was these adventurers that were the ideal candidates to recruit for them. That was a job given to the knights, while for a squire like Neia, she would typically be tasked with polishing armor and doing laundry. Gustav did float the idea of checking out the shrines, but in a place like this, he figured the shrines didn't have much pull anymore. Still, he did want to hear what the locals of the city had to say, but that was a route which could very well invite trouble. Say some of their paladins came across something they couldn't let stand, well, that would lead to an impasse of short-term good versus long-term good. Like, is the immediate injustice in front of them worth putting at risk the possibility of ending the mass injustice happening back at home?
Yeah, like focus on why you're there, what you're trying to do, grand scheme of things, all that stuff. Plus, you ain't gonna do anything while you're in Ainz's kingdom.
I mean, sure, they could step in to resolve whatever injustice they saw taking place here in the Sorcerer Kingdom, but that would most certainly warrant heavy criticism from the Sorcerer King. Enough that it might lead him not to help the Holy Kingdom at all. This all stemmed from the Paladin's unshakable view of justice, one Neia knew her father never understood. She herself never really thought much about it either, but now that her home was being invaded, her father's words started to resonate more with her. She was becoming less and less confident with the way justice was upheld from a paladin standpoint. She fully believed talking to her mother would have dissuaded those thoughts, but with her gone, she knew she had to find the answer herself.
You gotta
it's
act,
the first
you gotta
instance
rise
of a
up.
theme that becomes more and more prominent the deeper into the story we get. For now, a couple knights would be sent to the Shrine of the Four Gods, while several others would roam the city to gather intel. Remedios would stay behind just in case she needed to be reached easily, and Neia was of course in charge of polishing armor. It was a job she was actually rather thankful for, since it meant she didn't have to think too hard. She was more than happy to do something mundane for once.
Don't want to think brain
to when
exploding.
Gustav returned, and to everyone's surprise, they would have their meeting after only a day. What came after was a sequence of even more surprises, as nothing appeared as they had expected it to. First, the palace was definitely not one befitting that of a king, as when compared to the ones in re-estize or Roble, it had none of the history, solemnity, or wisme that those did.
Okay.
You wouldn't think that someone of such great power lived here. Instead, the only thing the building exuded was practicality, leading many of the paladins to look down on it.
It sounds very like Ainz, though, isn't it? It's just what I need, what I have. I don't need to go like all extravagant with it. We just got the essentials here.
It wasn't as if they were making that expression evident, but for Neia, who was very perceptive, she could easily tell that there was this faint air of condescendence surrounding them. This then begged the question of why, since with all his power and the workforce Neia knew he had, she knew it would be easy for him to build something far greater than this.
Oh yeah.
That being the case, Neia felt there must have been a reason for it. It was then that we finally get to this scene here. A grand welcoming of their flag on one side, Ainz's on the other, then an accompaniment of music.
Oh, cool.
This was rather significant since the fact it was their flag being flown alongside the Sorcerer Kingdoms indicated they were in fact being treated as state guests here.
That's awesome.
There was no longer any doubt that they were being accepted as official messengers of the Holy Kingdom.
So they just didn't bother with that in the anime. They just went easy. Just put the same flag on both sides. No one will pay attention. Don't matter.
A gesture which meant Neia was now an official representative of her country. This fully went to make her happy, but at the same time made her anxious because of all the pressure. Now, enter Albedo and her introduction as Prime Minister, and for the most part, this scene was pretty much the same.
Albedo's the
What
one.
they didn't show after, though, was the message sent by Albedo not asking for their weapons here. You see, the Paladins were about to be ushered in without being asked to disarm in any way whatsoever. This was highly unusual, since any king in any other country would never allow for that.
Oh god, yeah.
It was a sign of trust for a foreign force such as this to surrender their weapons first.
Yeah, but the thing is with Ainz, again, he doesn't need to, does he? Like, you got all these people coming in, bring your weapons, bring anything, it don't matter. He himself could just take them all down, and they don't have a clue.
So, this led Remedios to ask what should be done, garnering a fairly dismissive message of nothing. Albedo would mention how normally she would have them be held, but in a case such as this, it wasn't necessary.
There's no need.
It was a reason which went to make Remedios even more confused, leading to the abrupt question of why. There were multiple reasons Albedo had for it, but the main was that they weren't a threat. So, whether it was trust, safety, or straight up disrespect, the true reason would
What we got? Because we trust you, and we thought you might feel safer carrying our weapons. Of course, we don't consider you a threat, so just at the end, damn.
only be known to Albedo. If the answer truly was trust, though, then Remedios wanted that to be perceived both ways. That being the case, despite it not being necessary, Remedios would have her paladins hand over their weapons anyway.
Oh, okay.
All their swords except for hers would be surrendered. The whole gesture was received rather amicably, making Albedo seem like she was truly trying to be genuine with them. Neia wasn't sure if this was actually the case, but from what she could tell, her kindness seemed real.
Nah, Albedo hates them all.
The only vagueness came from why
She
she would
hates
let
them
them
all.
see her master while carrying weapons. Was it an order from the Sorcerer King himself, or was it perhaps their intent to make it known that they couldn't hurt him even if they tried? Or maybe he just had that many undead guarding him.
Nah, it's just that
Albedo
much of a
didn't
beast.
seem like very much of a fighter herself, so Neia was curious as to what other undead might be standing guard next to him. This brings us now to the audience with Ainz, a meeting which was unfortunately fully cut from the movie.
It's crazy.
That whole outburst we know Neia made only due to the scolding from Remedios, well, we actually get to see what it is she said in the novels. So, it was after the majestic magnificence of Ainz's garments were taken in that the most surprising part about him was the halo of darkness ever present behind him. They don't say whether it was purely aesthetic or some form of magic, but the aura given off by him was far different than any undead Neia had ever seen before. It was so different she felt it wasn't even right to call Ainz an undead. Strangely enough, she didn't feel a repulsion towards what she saw either, since the skeletal face in front of her seemed almost pure. To know his strength didn't exist in a range humans could even imagine, well, that made her entranced by his transcendent nature. She was so captivated that she totally forgot Albedo was standing next to him. What brought her back was Ainz's commencement of the conversation, starting with the typical pleasantries, then an immediate shift into what they wanted. There were no objections when both parties agreed to speak their minds frankly. Ainz would then ask the first question, wanting to know how things were in the Holy Kingdom. He stated how if they spoke truthfully and didn't leave anything out, there was a good chance the Sorcerer Kingdom might be able to do something. Remedios would respond with exactly what she told the Blue Roses, simply stating how they were barely holding off the invasion for now. She had essentially admitted their country was on the verge of collapse.
Oh, well, it is. You know, don't need to be around the bush. They go down.
This led Ainz to ask what their plan was, bringing Remedios to her request for Momon. Of course, this was a request Ainz was expecting, and the response he prepared for them was no. It was impossible for Momon to leave the Sorcerer Kingdom, and the reason for it was expressed to be because of the Sorcerer Kingdom's shame. Since Momon played a critical role in keeping the peace here, it was thanks to him that everyone else could live without fear. Such a reason wasn't one Remedios could really understand though, since with Ainz being the proud owner of a powerful army of undead, she felt they could keep the peace just fine without Momon. It was a comedic statement since these were paladins suggesting that undead were trustworthy. Ainz would
Think about what you
and
said.
offer his undead army instead of Momon, knowing full well just how ridiculous that was. The only reason he did is because the reason Remedios couldn't show up in the Holy Kingdom with an army of undead was the same reason Ainz couldn't let Momon go. The people wouldn't accept it. So, as much as an undead army would prove to be effective in wiping out the demi-humans, the idea of Remedios leading them was unimaginable. The same could be said for any paladin. Sure, their innate traits did make them the ideal soldiers, but to work with the life-hating enemies they were sworn to defeat, well, that was incredibly frightening.
Yeah, could you imagine that? It's like the one thing they've always been against, and then it's like, okay, I've got an army of it now.
Not to mention incredibly foolish too. It wasn't the smartest idea to bring a foreign army straight to the heart of your own kingdom, especially when that kingdom was already weakened to begin with. These were all things Ainz and his subordinates considered prior to Remedios realizing them herself, leading him to reveal the full picture. Basically, the Sorcerer Kingdom was in the middle of a transition phase. Everyone from farmers to security were learning to accept undead, but most were still early in the process of doing so.
Still quite fresh.
They were definitely more open now than they were when Ainz first took over, but still quite a ways away from the full acceptance he really wanted. So, it's Momon who provides relief to those still hesitant, and it's Momon who can bring that acceptance to the level Ainz is going for. Should Momon leave and the people lose their pillar of trust, then everything Ainz was working for would fall apart.
Just go.
His people's dissatisfaction would recede back to how it was when he first took over. It was after hearing this that Remedios would make an interesting counteroffer, suggesting her paladins stay behind instead of Momon. With undead being the enemies of paladins, who better to announce their trust for them than those known to despise them? The idea was that if even a paladin could trust an undead, then why couldn't they?
Anyone can.
This was a proposal Ainz had actually taken some time to consider, but after some intense deliberation, the decision remained a no. Reason being that paladins from a foreign country simply weren't the right messengers. They were strangers whose words didn't carry the same weight that Momon's did. Momon was there defending the people when Ainz took over, yet these paladins were just a bunch of nobodies. So there was a clear distinction between the trust behind Momon and the trust behind them. It was very unlikely that anyone would believe what it was they were trying to say.
It's just so clever, isn't it? Because Momon's obviously, well, he's not who he is he? It's like, oh, they say, it's just Ainz in a disguise, or it's, I can't, I'm terrible with, it's the guy that can shapeshift. Anyway, you know, it's just such a clever persona. I love it. Ainz is just such a clever man.
In the end, such was a logic none of the paladins could argue with, and it left them all in a disappointed silence. It's then Ainz would inquire about Yaldabaoth's maids and the state of the south, mainly because he was worried they might be lurking there. He was spreading the idea that it didn't make sense for Yaldabaoth to not have used such powerful pawns yet. Ainz would then shift the conversation yet again, this time asking what it is he would be rewarded with. He wanted to know what the Holy Kingdom had to offer in return for their assistance.
What do I
Remedios'
get?
response was one that any paladin would say, and it was the natural answer of their country's friendship, trust, and respect. This, however, meant nothing to Ainz, and that was a sentiment he made sure to express. What he was looking for was actual tangible benefits, not some useless feelings. Remedios unfortunately couldn't promise anything though, since even if she did, it was highly unlikely the next Holy King would follow through on it. Should it be one of the nobles from the south, then there was even the possibility her and her paladins would get locked up. That's just how little respect the nobles of the south had for them. So, Knowing she wouldn't be able to keep any of the promises she made here, Remedios surprisingly kept her mouth shut. It showed the true nature of her delegation was simply people of shaky standing searching for any kindness they could find. They weren't true royal ambassadors like how one might have thought. It was then that Gustav would chime in for Remedios, bringing up yet another point worth considering. It's true they may not be able to provide Ainz with any benefits themselves, but defeating Yaldabaoth was a benefit in and of itself. Before, he was dangerous with just himself and the maids, but now he had an entire army of demi-humans.
Got all that going on
That
as well.
being the case, if they were to let him go again, then there was no telling how strong he'd be the next time he showed up. So, basically, Gustav was trying to pressure Ainz via the threat of Yaldabaoth. He wanted him to see the value in acting now while Yaldabaoth was out in the open. The logic certainly made sense, and it was even enough to make Ainz seem like he was about to agree. Right before Gustav could celebrate, though, Ainz would insist Momon was still impossible. He refused to destabilize his own domestic politics for a threat that wasn't even at his country yet. Ainz, however, was a gracious god, and as a sort of compromise he would offer this. If the paladins could buy enough time for the Sorcerer Kingdom to stabilize their own situation, only then would they be able to send Momon to help. Remedios did say they were able to put up a fight still, so holding off the demi-humans should be no problem for them. That's when they would ask how long they needed to wait, a question to which Albedo would answer with years. 5 years. Everyone, including Ainz, knew that this was unreasonable, so when Gustav rebutted saying that that was a bit long, Ainz already knew what he was going to say next. He would order Albedo to shorten the time frame right in front of them, all for the sake of a friendly nation asking for help. He made it seem like the Sorcerer Kingdom was willing to make
Huge
a
favor.
sacrifice,
Huge
also they could help
favor.
their new friends in the Holy Kingdom.
Love it.
In the end, Albedo was able to reduce it down to 3 years. By cutting a few corners and risking a bit of inner turmoil, she suggested it was possible, just at the cost of their own people. Of course, 3 was far too long still, but none dared counter again out of fear Ainz may take it away. None except for Neia.
Oh.
This was the first scene where we got to see just how resolute she was
There we
since
go.
the moment she stepped in to make her request. Her only thought after was for Remedios to wait before executing her. So long as she was able to get her question out, she didn't care what happened to her after. It was a petition which would surprisingly work to garner Ainz's attention. So, it was after getting permission to speak that Neia would request for Momon to be sent sooner. You'd think a request like this would be dismissed immediately, but to everyone's surprise, Ainz would actually take it into consideration. He would proceed to ask when it was she would like him to be sent, a question to which Neia would
When should
answer
I
as
send
soon
him?
as possible. Ainz would then ask, even if it meant causing damage to his own kingdom, a rebuttal to which Neia would quickly respond, yes. It was a bold response that Neia was ready to
Whoa.
risk her life on.
Whoa.
If it truly went to upset the king, then she was happy to have Remedios execute her right here on the spot. She had even closed her eyes in preparation for the blade that was surely barreling towards her. What came instead was Remedios begging for forgiveness, followed by Ainz's acceptance of what her request entailed. You see, for Ainz, he understood that Neia's request was only natural. If saving one's country meant harm may come to another, then doing so was just a natural course of action.
It's just the
He
way
felt
things
no ill will
are.
towards Neia or the request she was making. It was then Ainz would ask if Albedo could stabilize the city in 2 years, a task which she stated would be very difficult. Even so, Ainz would order for it to be done anyway.
Make it
He would
so.
ensure his domestic affairs were taken care of, also Momon could be sent out sooner. Neia knew 2 years was still too long regardless, but to push further than this was just impossible. The kindness Ainz had showed here was already too much. She refused to take advantage any further. It was in the end that Remedios would apologize once again, a gesture Ainz believed was fully unnecessary. Reason being that, to him, Neia seemed like quite the valuable subordinate. I mean, it wasn't every day a squire was bold enough to petition a king. No, that was only something someone who truly loved their country would do. It was a deep passion Neia put on full display here. Their audience with Ainz would come to an end shortly after this, bringing us to a good place to stop now. There's still plenty more cut content to talk about, but
Mate.
I think we might finally be getting back into smaller details rather than entire scenes. Either way, if you liked what you saw and want to see more, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'll be back with the next video by the end of the week. Until then though, ciao.
Cool. My god, I love how much has been left out. Like, it's unreal. There's so much, like, kind of like story points and things, and like explaining how the world works and that. Then there's that, where it's just straight up defiance against Ainz, all this other things. It's class, it's so cool. And there's so much mischievous, devious, sneaky, schemy stuff going on in the background as well. Oh, it's just so good. So good, so good. And again, once new Overlord content comes out, we'll be all over it. Thanks for watching.